They're thinking about what can AI do for me and what task can I do? And instead, they should be thinking about what can I become with AI? Being somebody that is a true thought partner. You integrate with AI to end up creating your own natural works. But right now, you can see the noise and content even on LinkedIn. But the reality is in AI, what's going to be unique is what's up here. And how do you execute?
Closer. This is your time. Hit record on your crooked life. What's your story? Hey, say the words out loud. Mike and Scott gonna crack that crowd. What's your story? Hey, turn it up, let's go. Every voice, every scar, every road. What's your story? Mike and Scott. Let's talk.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to yet another episode of the What's Your Story podcast. I'm Scott Leese. This is my co-host and good friend, Mike Lindstrom. We're yin and yang today, buddy.
Yes, we are. Black and white.
Black and white. This is a special episode of the What's Your Story podcast. We actually have Patrick Antrim, who's coming back on the show for the second time. He's actually kind of our landlord.
That's a good point. We never thought of it that way.
I mean,
he is kind of the landlord
right here.
Everything that's
beautiful studio.
Everything that is here is Patrick and NectarFlow. So yeah, we can call him our landlord.
Maybe he's our boss, kind of in a little.
That's a new nickname. We got to go with that. Patrick the landlord.
The landlord, the boss. Patrick is the founder and CEO of a company called NectarFlow, which is all about AI and implementing it in your business. So we're going to get into all that kind of stuff today. So welcome to the show again.
Yeah, I love it. You guys are telling stories, and obviously being in the studio helps communicate that to the world. So, and I know
you're helping us with that.
You're helping that. We want to catch up on what's going on since we've talked. It's been a few months.
How about the NectarFlow story?
Yeah. Tell us what's going on, man.
I will tell you, it's evolved and changed in more simple ways. Essentially, selecting the right people and designing the organization you want. And I think a lot of times, especially when you're talking about go-to-market stuff with sales, you're trying to grow the business. Fundamentally, most companies are working with what they've got, even if the great leadership books that you've read, they've been written in a way that, like a chef, only cooking with the ingredients on the table or the counter. And what NectarFlow is allowing us to do now is select the right people so we can then change the DNA of the organization and design the organization the way that we envision it. And so I know you work a lot in go-to-market and sales strategy coaching. Yeah. We're really helping industries. Obviously, our beachhead is our multifamily. A third of Americans rent. We want to change the way people find about and discover housing, and having the right people to do that is a differentiator in telling that story. Insurance, another huge opportunity where the story is changing. You have a population of employers that are seeing their employment group age out. So you have to design the organization in the way that you want to win. And NectarFlow helps out, like a decision intelligence when you pick people.
When we were talking about insurance, you and I started that conversation a few months back because obviously you said your beachhead is being multifamily, and it's really neat for me to be able to share and contribute and hear where you want to go with that. I think that's only two verticals you mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't want people to hear that this is only two verticals, because this could go in any vertical, correct?
Right. When you think about the company, so if everybody's using the same technology, we're trying to get AI out of the conversation and back into what is really special about people. Well, it's their story. It's the full picture of what makes them unique and valuable into the organization. Those two industries obviously are where people shine and relationships matter. And that story matters for those types of companies when they're trying to create results in the business. So I think it's really any company and any organization is designed to collect people, which is what a company is.
And I think that people get hung up on is because AI means so much. That you've shifted that paradigm. It's not an AI company. It's something that's going and shifting the culture. I think that's a really important point that I've picked up from listening to you when I'm in this office and studio, and how much that's going to shift the conversation moving forward. What are your thoughts on that? Because everyone gets on, AI, and you shifted that conversation.
Yeah, I think ultimately, what is the purpose of an entrepreneur is to increase the levels of productivity in the business, right? Expand markets, grow sales, get resources so you can solve business problems, because when you sell, that matters. What's changing is the ground underneath every business. The workflows are changing. Well, what does that mean? That means that the skill sets of how you will select and hire people to do work of the future is different. And so if you don't have the right decision intelligence to select them coming in, you're working with what you got. And if what you have is somebody that's set in ways in status quo, or they're linear and they're looking at how work used to happen, they're not going to be the steady leaders to then guide that organization into the change that's upon them. We call one of our products Picasso Hire. So it's how do you select? And so if you think about a candidate that comes in, it's a stick figure. It's not really a full picture of who they are. It's really a resume is what they've done, right? So the job interview is where you want to get to, but you want to get there with more confidence, more decision intelligence to have a productive conversation, because nobody knows your business better than you guys, right? Or the person running their business. And so the interview historically has been mostly about a performance and confidence. And right now, leaders are guessing because they don't know how to measure capabilities and success factors that are going to drive businesses today and tomorrow. And then you look at maybe personality tests, and that's more like preference. And what we're looking at here is how do you know how somebody thinks? Because if we know how somebody thinks, we know how they'll make decisions inside the organization.
Give us an example of that, how someone thinks. Because I've heard you say this before, and it took me a little while to get my head wrapped around that. So when you're interviewing a candidate, you got the resume, they've submitted, they've gone through some questions or profiling. Now you're trying to get in their head. Talk to me a little about the science behind that.
Well, I'll be quick on this. I mean, the reality is we're not reading minds here, right? We're not talking about anticipating what they're going to say. What we're talking about here is people have certain unique experiences like an operating system, and they've worked somewhere else at another organization in the past. So in those situations, they've relied on certain resources and tools and frameworks. Well, that may be great in that environment, but in your stage, in your business, that may not, there may be a huge gap there. So for example, in a multifamily apartment, you would have somebody that has worked in a market where people are giving away free rent because there's more supply than there is customers to rent. In that leasing professional, the salesperson has an assumption and beliefs that you need to give away free rent in order to move somebody into the new building. Now, that's just because that's what they experience, and that translates to how they'll make decisions. So now you move that into a new situation where you're in another market where we're not giving away free rent, or the business doesn't allow for that. That's going to be important because you're going to listen to in the interview when they say things like, if this, then that. So if I had more concessions, or if I had 6 weeks of free rent instead of 4, we could have achieved 97% occupancy. And so you're listening for that in the way that they perceive solving business problems, and that will help us understand how they see the world and make decisions.
That's always been the hardest part. The whole interview process has been performative, is the word I think that you used
Confidence.
a little bit ago. Yeah, it's confidence, but you're trying to show somebody like this version of yourself that you think the other person on the other side of the
ritual,
table is looking for, but it falls apart, especially in sales. I've hired thousands of salespeople, literally. And the best sales leaders that I know, maybe you get it right 70% of the time, maybe.
Yeah.
If I hire 10 people, 7 of them will be studs and really good performers, and 30% of them are not. And there's a tremendous amount of waste with that. And you're trying to cut to the heart of who is this person? Not what they've done, what their resume is all about. Who are they right now? How do they think? How do they operate? How do they make decisions? Maybe how do they deal with adversity? How do they problem solve? How do they get around certain challenges, right? Those are the things that are extremely hard to test for in a 60-minute face-to-face interview.
Yeah, and we end up figuring that out after we've hired them.
Yes, unfortunately.
And that's because they start doing work. They show up to meetings and they usually rationalize a non-performance situation. Well, if I had more
excuses
sales,
come out.
Yeah, exactly.
Better territory.
So we figure that out. We figure that out before we make the hiring risk versus after. And the other piece of this is now we have another product called Ramp, where we are measuring, do they understand what they need to do in the first 60, 90 days of business. And so it goes from consuming information like training materials to measuring, do they comprehend and do they understand?
I love that. I love that you productize that. I've hacked this together over 20 something years, and you kind of feed people the material. And then I've always said, well, how do I know they actually learned it?
Yeah.
I gave you all this training material. I sat through Mike's sales training or whatever, but nobody ever tests to see if you actually assimilated that knowledge and can take action on it.
Yeah. And
so you productize that.
Well, we're role playing, and in sales, you know this. This is like looking at the objections. How are they proceeding when stressor happens? How do you get the information in that discovery process? So giving them a low stakes, fail safe environment to get the reps in where you're not bringing them to a sales kickoff event. It's like, oh, it's intimidating within their own organization and they don't want to look silly or these types of things. And so we give them in that product, you're bringing what typically happens in a business is we're not selecting the right people because we haven't ramped them up and we haven't developed, but we don't have the bench. And so those two departments, you think about like training and onboarding and the sales selection are compensating for each other. Yeah. So you typically have hired wrong. So now you're like, okay, let's find another role, another market for them or move them to another stage of the company. And now we're bringing those two things together.
So tell me about you guys have developed this kind of assessment within the system. Tell me a little bit about that. I've seen you demo it before where you have this set of words or phrases. You have to put them in different buckets and it kind of gives you one layer further of how they really think. Tell us a little about that.
Well, I think that, people are unique. The reason why we called the Picasso assessment Picasso is because it's the full picture, right? Art is appreciated in the context of how it's seen. If you put all the art in the world and you put it in a building, it'd be called a warehouse. If you pulled that piece of art out of the warehouse, put it on a white wall, shine a light on it, it's worth $60 million in the context of how it's seen. And so what we're really trying to help companies do is select better and find that diamond in the rough. So in that process, there's reasoning models that help understand the beliefs that somebody has and the assumptions, and they stack, right? And then they end up with those beliefs, these are the assumptions that they make and they bring to decision making. And then there's conditionality, which is sort of like this, if this, then that. Like if I had capital, then I would make the startup launch, or you could bootstrap it. There's different ways. But if we know how they think before that happens, and then necessary and sufficient, these are mostly the conditions that they believe are necessary and sufficient to ensure that success happens. And it's a lot of cognitive science that I don't want to bore your listeners with, but the reality is this has been battle tested, thousands of assessments. This science goes back to the 40s when the U.S. Air Force was looking at, they were a wartime employer and then became a peaceful employer. And it's like, well, who do you keep? Yeah. And then how do we align them with what leaders within the organization?
I think that's actually a relevant analogy to what the workforce is going through right now because of the introduction of AI into it. And darn near every business is trying to reduce headcount, all the reduction in force stuff. But now they have to look at it through a different framework, a different lens of like, well, now who should I keep? And this wartime, peacetime worker kind of analogy is an interesting one for where people are at right now. Which employees do I keep? Do I keep the peacetime employee, the wartime
I never
employee?
thought of it that way. That's true.
Well, I love the analogies on that wartime stuff because there's external things that are driving leaders to do, entrepreneurs, business owners, you name it, to do different things differently. And, having known that, the reality is leaders, when they are in situations for like debt, leverage, acquisition, business strategy, M&A stuff, they don't delegate that activity. They are in it. They understand, they put deals together, all that stuff. But when it comes to hiring, historically, they outsource it or they say, well, we have someone in HR for that. This is no longer an HR conversation. This is about how do you design the business that meets the needs of the customer of the future and where the world is going. And that is an executive entrepreneur conversation that they need to have decision responsibility over. Yeah. So obviously HR supports all the things that are in that part of the business, but the reality is it's not like give it to a recruiter and find me something. That's not what a great sports team would do.
So how are you thinking about growing the team at NectarFlow? You're going to use the product on them, with them, right? Sure. You eat your own dog food, of course, or whatever. But what are the things that you're looking for as you enter this new phase of your business from an employee?
I think sales, revenue is important for a business. I think using that revenue in ways that you can interact and create value for an organization obviously is game on. But from an engineering standpoint, we are getting 5-10 times the output from our current team. So we're still in the midst of figuring out what that need is. And we've taken, instead of like an AI and create 40% more productivity in your business, sort of a broader global conversation, to more narrow and more specific. And that's why we're owning this workflow of selecting the right people, ramping them up to productivity, assessing how they're doing, and then ultimately knowing what motivates them. So that's how we're thinking about it, is one workflow, not the role. So not thinking, do I need an SDR? Do I need a go-to-market leader? Do I need a chief revenue officer? I'm not even looking at titles anymore. I'm looking at what is the work that needs to be done, and then where can I use AI to apply that work consistently to get the most leverage? That's what I'm interested in, leverage. And it's interesting because we're getting more expansion versus even thinking about how do we eliminate or cut back. It's mostly like, how do we attack this industry How do we become the category leader? And how do we design that category in a new way? Because others are going to sit and wait and watch what everybody else does.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I was on a conversation, as a coaching conversation with a group, and it was an HR director on there, and she had said, well, we're really kind of intimidated by what AI is doing for our industry. It's going to be like sourcing resumes, and basically what she was saying with her own limiting beliefs is it's going to be taking my job. That's what I heard in the language patterns. That's not true with what you guys are doing. You're trying to run alongside an HR director or an HR team and say, hey, this is the way of the future. It's going here. It's already headed here. It's not here to scare you or replace you. Speak to that a little bit, because I think there's a big limiting belief out there that, all these new AI tools are going to just eliminate HR altogether. That's not true.
Yeah, so we don't take any humans out of the decision making. No technology should ever tell an organization who to hire and things like that. I think that they're getting a lot of tools that are helping them with efficiency and automation and summarization of information that comes through, and that's all great. But we're doing something totally different. Companies are using all the tools that they may have used already. So it's not like a switch kind of situation. It's mostly like, this might be the reason why, despite all the tools that I have been using in the world, I still have not solved this problem. And that's because we're guessing in the interview. And so what we're doing with NectarFlow is bringing organizations, allowing them to use whatever they're using now, integrate with whatever tools. They don't need to make a change. There's no change in the process. But what we're going to add in is right in front of that decision, get them to the interview the fastest way we can with most of the information that they can make a better quality interview, and they decide who hires, who advances, and all that stuff. It's just something they've never done before.
Yeah.
Right? You wouldn't be able to do this unless
That person that's worried about that, really, they just need to grow their skill set.
Oh, I agree.
There's no place for a worker who doesn't pick up AI integration and skills. That person will be in trouble.
That's what I told the CEO.
So if you're just saying, no, I've been working a particular way for 40 years, like I don't want to learn anything new, you're in big trouble.
Yeah.
That person, I don't think, has a working future.
No.
But that person can learn all sorts of things about AI and how to apply it and make themselves more productive, more valuable to the business. That's what you're looking for, I think, is people who are willing to take on this new challenge. I got to learn these new skills in order to stay relevant and make an impact.
Yeah, and that's where we need more of your coaching, is at the end of the day being empathetic to like a B2B process. The fact that the person has a single flow of income, they don't want to make the wrong move. Their job is amicable, analytical, and its job is risk management, avoid risk. And then you have this AI thing, which is all a technology can't see. And so they're just understanding that in that process and that's why we have the media and we have the video and we have all the things that we do with education, is because we just need to bring people to develop new capabilities so they have more confidence to make a yes decision. And that takes some time, more time than we'd like.
Yeah.
So Miles is your guru behind the scenes. I know he was here in the office. We saw him this morning, and he was telling me that you guys have a new tool. I don't even know if it's out in the market, but it's a search tool. You speak to this, how you're getting that search tool to use on behalf of whether it's HR internally or for recruiter. So it's a new tool that you guys are bringing in outside of Picasso and Ramp. Am I hearing that correctly?
It's part of Picasso. So you think that Picasso was inbound, your advertising applications are coming in and you're processing that information. This is outbound. So what we believe is some of the greatest people you want to hire are winning somewhere else, they're not in the job marketplace. So this gives us access to 800 million candidates to be able to go find somebody in a market and then have coffee or an introduction. And it's more of the scouting, right?
Yeah.
It's the outsourcing.
You can pare down that 800 million via certain signals.
Yeah.
Like, for example, if you've been at a job for 3 years.
Yeah.
That's like
skills.
There's like a break point there sometimes at 3 years where maybe they're kind of stagnant. Maybe they're looking for something else.
There's a tool that allows you to do what he's talking about, right? You can source it or create different fields to be able to narrow it down.
Correct. Yeah. By skills, by certain unique technology. Are they trained on Sales Navigator? Do they know a certain unique industry software that, so when you're ramping them up, they already know those things.
Yeah.
And it's a more productive conversation.
It's applying signals that you look for in sales to break into accounts to hiring and recruiting. Like if you're a sales guy, Mike, and I saw that your company got acquired by a private equity firm, I'm hitting you up in 6 to 12 months for sure.
Yeah.
Because often what happens
settle.
is you let the dust settle and then people are like, this company is not the same anymore. And they're ripe to be plucked.
Yeah.
So that's like a signal that I would look for, right?
That excites me.
And without the 30% costs of recruiter fee and things like that. So we're saving a lot of budget line items for that.
So not just the fact that you help us with our podcast, with this being a landlord here in our facility, but what you're doing with NectarFlow helps guys like us. So we don't look at it as a threat. I mean, the training tool, the ramp tool, it's voice. So it's literally speaking to the agent. And so you can actually be the sales director listening to the conversation that your AE's having with it to make sure that they're actually getting it.
Yeah.
So cool.
Yeah.
And it's immediate.
Yeah, it's an opportunity to go
powerful.
back and coach too then. You're like, well, in these types of situations, here's how I may approach that. So that could work really well in compliance, making sure people are ready for the customer service.
I'm looking forward to being a referral partner.
I know.
Yeah.
I know.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why I like talking to Patrick and gets my mind thinking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And we're only talking about just 2 verticals that you're flirting with right now. Multifamily, you're already there, full blown.
Yeah, well, it's for any company in the world, really. But we have deep relationships in the multifamily industry. And then obviously with insurance, we've got some category kings.
You want to make sure that you nail the first couple of industries and get the process smoothed out before you try to sell to everybody, though.
Yep.
Well, so what are you hearing from some of these experts? You talk about this big team of ASU professors and AI gurus you're hanging out with up in Stanford. What's the latest and greatest of you that you can share on that comes out of some of these meetings?
Well, I think being in those conversations, privileged to be not only in the conversation from an academic standpoint, but in the application to actual real life use cases. And I think what most people are doing right now is they're excited about AI, but they're thinking about it wrong. They're thinking about what can AI do for me and what task can I do? And instead they should be thinking about what can I become with AI and not think about AI being an outsourced thought partner to being somebody that is a true thought partner. You're not outsourcing your thinking to AI, and you actually have a process of which how you integrate with AI to end up creating your own natural works. But right now, you can see the noise and content even on LinkedIn, content on marketing, email, sales development, a lot of outreach that feels like it's just the marketers sometimes ruin some things, but the reality is in AI, what's going to be unique is what's up here and how do you execute. So this execution advantage is huge, I think, in what's different right now. And there's a process, Joseph calls it the Aristotelian loop, which is a stage of thinking where what typically happens right now, somebody reads a LinkedIn post, they get inspired, they're like, I want to feel smart too, and they go and paste it and post it, and they've outsourced all of their own thoughts.
They're
to
outsourcing
AI.
their thinking.
They're outsourced their thinking to AI, and it looks vanilla. It doesn't land. It just like good copy does. It just goes over your head. Right now in this room, there's all kinds of musical artists coming through this room, but we're not tuned into it. The signal. But if we turned it to Spotify and we'd searched for Led Zeppelin or something, we would hear it because we're tuned into it. So good copy does that too. Right now, AI is creating so much noise, nobody's tuning in.
Yeah.
And so the leader's job is to cut through that noise and think from your own self-experience and things like that. But the Aristotelian loop, which is a thinking process, which Joseph Kazir, head of data and analytics at Arizona State University, we have this actually in our technology to measure and assure that people understand how they're thinking and what do they really understand what they just learned. And this goes back to like Socratic method. You think of certain business frameworks and there's thousands of them. And then you have Aristotelian or Aristotle where you have, do they test assumptions? And then you get into real life scenarios, groups, and you get it offline. You take what you know and what you learned and how you use it as a thought partner, and then you interact and you get feedback and you test and you iterate. And then you share, and then you teach. So that whole process can be measured inside our product. But what's fascinating is what people do right now is they observe, they learn something, and they go right to share. They miss all that.
Yeah.
And they're sharing stuff that they haven't tested, they haven't put to work, they haven't iterated, they haven't failed, they didn't make adjustments on, and they're just sharing malpractice, bad information.
Yeah.
Every day on LinkedIn, buddy, every day.
They're just trying to signal that, look at this, I know something.
Yeah, I know.
Right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, that's a signal too. Like,
Yeah.
I need attention, I need marketing, I need confidence, all
Dopamine
that
hit.
stuff. But,
Is really what it is. at the end
anyway,
of the
so I
day.
think just kind of going slower and just using AI to become more as a leader, and you now have this supreme intelligence. The CEOs have always had the great attorneys, the great accountants, the experts, and they make decisions from the perspectives of people that have unique discipline and knowledge over something, and then to make a business decision. Or do you build an apartment building? I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on to bring a building together or build a car. You have to know what that is. So I think people need to know how to think. And right now they're not. They're just outsourcing it to AI.
What are some of the top AI tools that you use outside of NectarFlow? What will be some of the ones you would recommend?
I think all the obvious from Claude to OpenAI, ChatGPT, you have Perplexity for research. But really, those are the ones that I'm not using a lot of point solution tools that are API to some of those things. There's a lot of conversation right now around execution, agentic stuff, Claude Cowork and Claw, these types of things. Too early for me to tell where that's going, but everyone else has ChatGPT and Claude. I mean, you've got Grok and all the great things, but those things are more like, I believe, frontier, and those are just going to benefit the world just like Google has all benefited us in
I
search.
think everybody has access to all of those tools,
Yeah.
so it's totally democratized. But I think what the more advanced users of these AI tools have done now is they've personalized the AI for their own particular use case.
Yeah.
Right,
For
which
whatever
means
they're doing.
execution is where it's at right now, right? And being able to understand who you're sitting across from and how you can contribute value to them.
So for me, I'm thinking like, well, what do I have running in the background right now via my AI and agents and bots that is doing work for me that I otherwise would not be getting done?
Yep.
And if you don't have something like that going on, one could argue that you're behind.
Oh, I would agree with that. Claude's been around, but it just came out of nowhere. Television advertising, people that would never even know this stuff, like, oh, I'm on Claude. I'm like, would you skip over ChatGPT? Like, oh, I never even caught on to that ship. I just jumped on the Claude. So I don't know why that happened. Maybe it was the advertising, the marketing, and what they did in the last 12 months, but more people are on Claude, I found. I don't know if you, what's your vote on it, Claude or ChatGPT? I'm on both.
It depends on what you're doing. You know? So it's just like a great sports league. Sometimes you have dynasty years, and sometimes you get out on your heels when you're the leader and you've won every year.
This is a Yankees reference.
Yeah.
I feel like this
And then you have
I
to
like
turn
what
it
he's-
around.
I
you
like
know
what
what I
he's
mean?
thinking, though.
But look what Michigan did with college basketball this year. What do they do next year with that momentum? And how do you build? So I think it's important to say, never underestimate a company. They could be on a journey that they could be 36 months from a total game changer. And I think it's exciting because the playing field's kind of been leveled.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And now the business translators, those that know how work is happening, are the ones that are most advantaged. You don't need to be technically advanced. You don't need to have all the servers and all the stuff. You don't even know the tech. I'm not even talking about AI anymore because everyone else that shouldn't be talking about it is talking about it. So the bad writers are writing. Let them write and let people follow them down a path where they don't get an outcome. Then they retreat back to the people that they trust and provide value with.
We should be asking ourselves questions like, what could I be doing right now if I could be in two places at once? What could my business be doing in the other room over there, right? And the more creative you can get around the prompts and the things that you build for yourself, that's really where you're going to get ahead.
Yeah, I
think.
agree with you. I mean, we've always taught power of questions and being curious, no judgment. But
They've
I think
talked about it as prompt writing and stuff like that right now, but I think it's more than prompt writing.
yeah,
They were teaching people how to use, what was Google when they did the circles? People were teaching people all kinds of things as things evolved. I think what's really exciting is when companies realize their workforce can show up with a healthier mindset, better access to the right medical information that allows them to live healthy and stronger. They're working out, they're moving, they're in connection with other people. What does that do to a workforce or growth in having happier, more engaged, more interested employees versus we're just doing all this work stuff that can be done different ways?
yeah. I think it's the circle of getting back at people, connecting with people is big thing. We've talked about that, live events and masterminds, and I think this is just another tool to help that. It's not a disintermediation, as they would call it, where it's a separator. It's actually bringing people together. But I think that's where online communities and things that you and I've done, masterminds and online communities or groups, is powerful.
Yeah, it is single-handedly the greatest rearrangement of workforce and productivity and skill sets that anybody's ever seen. And so if you can be that strong leader that can say, hey, listen, I'm going to guide you productively in a way that it's not on one side or the other. You just ultimately are back to the basics and you can have a great human connection and you create value. And part of that value is not just hiding and doing nothing. It's getting into the game and learning from your own self, thinking for your own self and creating that value. But yeah, it's never been a more exciting time.
Well, how much longer till the public can get their hands on NectarFlow?
NectarFlow's, we're ready.
Live. Tell everybody where to find.
Yeah, so NectarFlow.com, you can kind of see our 4 solutions, which is our Picasso Hire, selecting the right people. Ramp is getting them and assuring that they understand what they need to do before they get in front of the customer. Think of onboarding. And then our Inside Ops, think of M&A, look at management moves, promotions, assessing them as they move throughout the organization to make sure that they're engaged. And then our motivational profile, which is knowing what motivates them so you can lead them in ways better.
Great.
So do you have anything coming up? Any big conferences or anything, even selfishly with multifamily, anything you could promote?
We have our annual summits for the Multifamily Innovation. We have Technology and AI Summit. That happens every year. It's our 12th year. Other than that, we're doing webinars and podcasts like you guys are to help educate the market in other ways as well.
Good stuff.
Great.
Appreciate you coming on again, man.
Yeah,
You're a resident AI guru.
Yeah.
A guru and our landlord. Hi, everybody. Thanks so much for tuning in. Check out NectarFlow, nectarflow.com. Patrick Antrim was just nice enough to join us today once again. So appreciate everybody.
You had to come all up 30 feet from his office to here.
Just from over there.
Big commute for him.
All right, we'll see y'all next time. What's Your Story podcast.
Hey, everyone. Mike Lindstrom here. Thanks for tuning in to What's Your Story with Mike and Scott. Make sure to hit the subscribe button for new episodes every Tuesday morning and check out a few of our previous episodes below. We'll see you next time.